Welcome to Meow Diaries, stories designed to help you relax and fall asleep. Tonight I have prepared a new story for you, a tale about a cup of tea, a cat, and the moon. Before we start the story, I would love for you to support the channel. Just click like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments how you are feeling tonight. It means a lot to me, even if it's just a word. But before we begin, I would like to share a little secret that can help you relax and fall asleep more easily. Instead of just listening, try to imagine each scene vividly. The colors, the sounds, even the smells. The more your mind gets into the game, the more it will calm down and gently guide you to sleep. Let's take a deep breath. Slowly, and exhale gently. Again, inhale and exhale. Feel your body relax. Feel your thoughts begin to fade away. Now find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and let's begin the story. Ready? Let's begin. That winter night, the cat heard something unusual, a soft creak behind the old fence. The sound was subtle, almost swallowed by the hush of falling snow, but it stirred his ears, drawing his gaze toward the frost-laced window pane. Beyond the glass, the moon hung low, casting a silvery glow over the quiet backyard, where bare branches reached skyward like outstretched arms. Inside, the room was warm and dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a solitary lamp with a faded shade. Its light pooled onto the worn armchair and the small wooden table beside it, upon which rested a delicate porcelain cup. Steam curled upward from the cup, carrying the faint aroma of chamomile and honey. The cat leapt onto the windowsill, his paws making no sound as they landed on the soft cushion that had long since molded to his shape. He settled there, his body curling into a tight ball, tail wrapped around his nose. Yet his eyes remained open, fixed on the moonlit scene outside. Snowflakes drifted lazily, each one unique, each one melting upon contact with the earth. The world was silent, save for the occasional creak of the old house settling into the cold. The cat's ears twitched at the sound of footsteps approaching. They were slow, deliberate, and familiar. A figure entered the room, wrapped in a thick robe, slippers shuffling against the wooden floor. They paused by the table, lifting the cup and bringing it to their lips. The cat did not turn to look. He knew this ritual well. The warmth of the tea, the quiet contemplation, the shared solitude. After a moment, the figure moved to the window, standing beside the cat. A hand reached out, fingers gently brushing the cat's fur. He leaned into the touch, a soft purr rumbling in his chest. Together, they watched the snow fall, the world outside cloaked in white. The moonlight bathed them, both, a silent witness to their companionship. Time seemed to slow, the boundaries between moments blurring. The cat closed his eyes, the warmth of the room, the gentle touch, and the presence beside him lulling him into a state of contentment. The world outside continued its quiet dance, snowflakes pirouetting through the air, settling softly upon the ground. In this shared silence, there was understanding. No words were needed, no grand gestures, just the simple act of being, together, present, and at peace. The cat's breathing slowed, matching the rhythm of the falling snow, the gentle rise and fall a testament to the tranquility of the moment. As the night deepened, the figure moved away, leaving the cat alone on the windowsill. But the warmth lingered, both from the touch and the shared presence. The cat remained, eyes half closed, watching as the moon traced its path across the sky, casting shifting shadows upon the snow-covered ground. Eventually, the cat stretched, his body arching gracefully before he settled once more. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of a distant clock. Outside, the snow continued to fall, each flake a whisper in the night, and the cat, content and at peace, drifted into sleep, the moon keeping watch over him. That night, the air in the house felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The cat, having drifted into a soft sleep on the windowsill, stirred faintly, the tip of his tail twitching against the worn cushion. Outside, the snow continued its silent descent, each flake catching a sliver of moonlight before settling soundlessly. The teacup, now forgotten on the wooden table, had cooled. A thin skin of tea gathered at the surface, reflecting the moon's faint light, trembling ever so slightly as the house settled into its quiet. The figure from earlier, who always seemed to move as though treading softly over fragile ground, had not returned. The cat opened one eye, his ears flicking at the near silence. In the far corner of the room, the grandfather clock let out a single, low chime. Not a sound loud enough to wake the house, but enough to remind the cat that time, too, moved forward, even when it felt as though everything had stopped. The cat stretched, long and slow, his claws grazing the edge of the cushion, before he rose to his feet, shaking sleep from his limbs. The windowsill felt colder beneath his paws than it had earlier, and he leapt down softly, landing without a sound on the hardwood floor. His steps were unhurried as he padded towards the darkened hallway, pausing only once to glance back at the window. The moon, now higher in the sky, cast a pale glow through the frosted glass, painting shifting patterns on the floorboards. The cat hesitated, his whiskers trembling at an unseen memory, before continuing into the shadows. In the hallway, the familiar scent of old wood and faded lavender lingered. The air was cooler here, the quiet thicker, as though it held echoes of voices long gone. The cat moved past closed doors, their frames outlined faintly by the light spilling from the sitting room. His tail brushed the edge of a hallway table, where a vase of dried flowers stood, brittle and untouched. One petal, already loosened by time, fell silently to the floor. There was a faint sound, almost imperceptible, the shift of weight on Chiwanin, an old armchair, the creak of a floorboard in another room. The cat paused, ears pricked, but the house returned to stillness. Slowly, he turned back toward the sitting room, drawn by the comfort of the lamp's glow and the now lukewarm scent of chamomile. As he re-entered the room, his gaze landed on the teacup once more. It stood there, solitary, as though waiting. The cat approached, the faint scent of honey still lingering. He sat by the table, his posture as poised as if he were keeping vigil over the forgotten drink. Outside, the snowflakes thickened, blurring the world beyond the window into a soft haze of white. The cat's ears twitched as a faint draft stirred the edge of the curtain. It shifted slightly, allowing a sliver of moonlight to cut across the floor. The light caught his fur, turning it silver in patches, like quiet ripples on water. For a moment, he was still, listening to the quiet, feeling the pulse of the night. Then, as if deciding, he stood again and padded toward the door to the hallway, but not before glancing back at the window. The moon hung high and pale, its silent presence a constant companion. The cat's tail flicked softly against the doorframe, leaving a faint trace of warmth against the cool wood, before he disappeared into the deeper shadows of the house. In the distance, faint sounds stirred again, barely audible, like whispers, of a memory brushing against the edge of awareness. The cat moved further down the hallway, past the closed doors, past the brittle flowers, until he reached the far end where a small door led to the back porch. He sat there, waiting. The moonlight fell through a narrow window nearby, painting his shadow long against the floor. The air was colder here, the scent of snow seeping through the thin seams of the door. The cat's breath puffed softly in the chill, his whiskers quivering as though tracing patterns in the air. Behind him, the house remained silent, save for the faint ticking of the distant clock, each beat marking the passage of moments that felt suspended. And there, in the quiet, the cat closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. He felt the weight of the house around him, the stillness, the absence, and yet there was presence in that absence, a waiting, a listening, as though the house itself shared the cat's silent vigil. The snow outside thickened, muffling the world, creating a cocoon of quiet. Minutes passed, perhaps more, perhaps less, before the cat stirred. He turned back from the door and retraced his steps, his paws leaving no trace on the old floor. The dried flower on the hallway table still lay where it had fallen, a single pale petal against the wood. The cat paused to glance at it before, continuing back to the sitting room, where the lamp's glow still held its soft vigil against the night. He leapt once more onto the windowsill, curling into his earlier position, tail tucked close. Outside, the moon had shifted, but its light still reached him, as though tracing his outline with a whisper of silver. The teacup remained on the table, its surface now still and cool, reflecting the faintest glimmer of light. The cat's breathing slowed again, the rise and fall of his sides syncing with the snow's silent descent. In the quiet house, where presence lingered without form, he rested, watched over by the moon, by the unseen companion who had once reached out a hand, and by the quiet understanding that sometimes, in silence, there is company. The night deepened, shadows lengthened, and the cat's breathing slowed further, until the rhythm of sleep embraced him once more. Elsewhere in the house, beyond the well-trodden path the cat had wandered before, a soft glow bloomed, a flicker of candlelight in the dining room. The scent of beeswax wove faintly through the air, mingling with the cooler drafts seeping in from the cracks beneath the doors. The cat, still curled on his windowsill perch, stirred at the change in scent, his ears angled, and his whiskers trembled as though they too could sense the subtle shift. He rose slowly, this time moving with a cautious grace, his paws silent, against the floorboards. The room behind him, once so familiar with its comforting lamplight and cooled cup of tea, seemed to soften into the background as he padded away. The house felt larger now, stretched by shadows that danced under the candle's flicker. In the dining room, the candle sat atop a slender brass holder, its flame trembling against a faint current of air. It cast long, uneven shapes across the walls, shapes that wavered and reached, only to dissolve again. The cat approached with a wariness that wasn't fear but a quiet respect, as though he understood that the flame held a presence all its own. The light brushed his fur, transforming the familiar tabby stripes into waves of gold and copper. He blinked slowly, the reflection of the flame caught briefly in his eyes, before stepping closer. The table itself was bare, save for a single plate pushed aside, crumbs scattered like tiny remnants of a forgotten conversation. The scent of beeswax mingled with a hint of citrus from a half-squeezed lemon left nearby, sharp against the softened air. The cat paused, ears pricked, then leapt lightly onto one of the dining chairs, settling into a crouch. From here, he could see the candle more closely, the way its flame curved slightly, responding to the unseen pull of air, as if acknowledging something invisible. His tail twitched once, then lay still. He listened, not to sound, but to the hush that deepened around him. Outside, the snow's fall slowed, the flakes heavier now, blanketing the ground like the softest quilt. The moon remained a pale sentinel beyond the window, but its light seemed dulled here, its silvery touch muted by the candle's glow. The cat blinked again, a slow, deliberate motion, as though marking the moment in silence. He descended from the chair, his paws brushing against the cool floor. The candle's light followed him in uneven fragments, shadowing his movements across the room. A draft stirred once more, causing the flame to lean perilously, almost to the point of extinguishing, but it recovered, flaring slightly before settling into a steady, quiet burn. The cat paused at the doorway, his tail flicking lightly against the frame. He felt the house shift, almost imperceptibly, as if responding to his presence, not with noise, but with a subtle shift in balance, as though something unseen had realigned. The cat moved onward, retracing steps but with a different cadence. His paws met the floorboards not with caution, but with a quiet certainty, as though he had settled into a rhythm with the night. In the sitting room, the lamplight remained, though it felt gentler now, its edges softened by the candle's echo. From the other room, the cup of tea, once forgotten, now seemed almost a part of the background hum of the house, a quiet witness to the passage of the hours. The cat did not return to the windowsill immediately. Instead, he moved toward the rug near the hearth, where no fire had been lit for many days, and settled there, stretching his body long against the faded weave. The chill of the floor seeped through the rug, but he did not mind. His eyes drifted, half closed, his breathing steady. The candle's light from the dining room flickered faintly against the walls, casting ghost-like patterns that danced at the edges of his vision. The moon's glow returned, silvering the room with its distant touch. Together, the light from flame and moon wove a quiet tapestry across the walls and floor, painting shapes that shifted and softened with each breath. The house, the cat, the night, all held their silence, not heavy, but expectant, as though waiting for something unnamed to arrive. The candle's scent of beeswax thickened slightly as the wick burned lower. The cat's tail twitched once, then fell still. He was neither waiting nor expecting, only present. The quietness was not emptiness, but a fullness of stillness, where everything, even absence, was allowed space to breathe. And as the candle's flame finally dipped, drawing the last of its glow into the wick's tip, before releasing it into darkness, the cat lifted his head, ears flicking toward the window where the moon had shifted once more. The silver light now bathed the rug, illuminating the cat's shape with a softness that felt like a hand resting gently on his fur. Without a sound, the cat rose, stretched, and returned to the windowsill where he curled once more, the moonlight his only companion. The night resumed its gentle hush, wrapping the house, the cat, and the fading scent of candle and tea in a silence so complete it felt almost like peace. Later that night, A faint rustle stirred beyond the window, a low, wandering sound, more a sigh than a voice. The cat's ears twitched where he lay, curled on the windowsill, his whiskers quivering faintly as he felt the subtle shift in the air. Unlike the earlier stillness, this new sound was layered. The snow's steady fall, now softened into a distant hush, met by the occasional creak of a shifting branch. And underneath it all, a deeper sound, the whisper of wind threading through unseen spaces. The house, long settled into its nighttime hush, seemed to lean into the sound as though listening. The cat rose slowly, stretching each limb with a practiced grace, his claws extending briefly before they retracted. He stepped down from the windowsill, his paws pressing lightly into the aged floorboards, and padded towards the back door, drawn by the shifting air. There, where the drafts found the seams in the wood, and the moonlight cast a faint glow across. The kitchen tiles, the wind's presence was more pronounced. It teased at the edges of the curtain, lifting it with a careful hand, just enough to reveal a sliver of the world beyond. The night transformed, the snow now tinged with a shimmer of frost, each flake sharper, more crystalline. The cat sat at the threshold, ears angled toward the outside world, listening not for anything specific, but for the shape of the night itself. He blinked slowly, the thin film of frost on the window glass catching moonlight like a fine lace. Somewhere beyond, the wind gathered its breath and exhaled softly against the eaves, a sound that could have been a word or simply a sigh. He watched, as the curtain shifted again, lifting just enough for the moon's light to stroke the floor in a thin, wavering line. His paw extended, almost hesitantly, resting just at the edge of the light. The contact was nothing, barely perceptible against the wood, but it felt as though he'd touched something vast, not the light itself, but the silence it illuminated. The wind's sound deepened then, a low hum beneath the night's quieter noises. The cat's eyes reflected the movement of the curtain, the subtle play of shadows across the floor, and for a moment, his form seemed to dissolve into the darkness around him, as though he were part of the house itself, its breath, its waiting. He shifted slightly, rising to his feet, and moved further into the kitchen, where the air was cooler, carrying the scent of frost and distant earth. The tea had long since cooled, the candle now extinguished, leaving only the faint trace of beeswax and a thin curl of smoke that had long faded into the ceiling. Here, in this part of the house, the quiet was deeper, the light more fractured, as it filtered through panes of glass dappled with frost. The cat leapt lightly onto a chair near the table, his tail curling around his paws as he settled. He watched as the shadows danced across the walls, not hurried, but with a slow, measured grace. Outside, the wind whispered again, the sound, slipping through gaps in the eaves like a story half told, a memory half remembered. In the distance, a branch, heavy with snow, released its burden with a muted thump, sending a small cloud of powder into the air. The sound was barely audible inside the house, yet the cat's ears flicked toward it, acknowledging the shift. His gaze softened, his breathing even, as though the sound were not a disturbance, but part of the larger rhythm of the night. For a time, he remained there, perched like a silent observer. His presence did not disturb the quiet, but became part of it, a pulse within the hush, a soft echo of something unseen. The moon's light shifted again, angling through the window to catch the curve of his back, illuminating the fine lines of his fur with a silken glow. Eventually, the wind softened, its voice receding into a gentle murmur that barely stirred the curtain. The cat stood, a fluid motion, and returned to the window by the sitting room, where the lamplight's glow had dimmed almost to nothing. He resumed his place on the windowsill, curling into the shape he knew so well, his body warming the cushion beneath him. Outside, the snow continued its quiet descent, but it was finer now, less insistent, as though the night itself had grown weary. The moon's light, though still present, had thinned, its brilliance softened by the frost-laden air. The house, too, seemed to sigh, its beams and joints easing into the deeper hours before dawn. The cat's breathing slowed, his body rising and falling with a rhythm that matched the world around him. His tail lay still, his whiskers relaxed, and his eyes, half-lidded, reflected not the room, but the gentle play of light and shadow against the frost-covered glass. In this moment, neither fully awake nor fully asleep, the cat seemed to inhabit a space between worlds, the world inside, with its dimming light and soft echoes, and the world outside, where snow and wind conspired to reshape the night. He existed within the hush, a small, warm presence against the chill. And as the wind whispered its last, the cat's breath aligned with the quiet, drawing him into a sleep so gentle it felt like a continuation of the silence itself. The cat's sleep was shallow, not the deep, untroubled slumber of kittens, but the light doze of one who keeps a paw anchored in the waking world. His breathing had long settled into the measured rhythm of dreams, but something, a faint sound, neither harsh nor familiar, pulled him back. A hollow knock, not sharp, not forceful, just a soft, almost hesitant tapping from somewhere near the back door. The cat's ears pricked, his body tensing slightly. He remained motionless at first, as though listening with more than just hearing. Listening. With his very skin, his whiskers, the spaces between his paws. The knock came again. 3 soft, uneven taps, spaced just irregularly enough to catch attention. Slowly, the cat uncurled, stretching one leg, then the other, before rising into a low, cautious stance. His steps were deliberate, his paws pressing into the worn floorboards with a sound so soft it was almost imagined. The moonlight, now paler and more diffuse through the window, traced faint shapes along his back as he moved toward the source of the sound. At the back door, the curtain still stirred faintly, though the wind had long quieted. The cat sat, ears angled forward, body poised, as the knock came once more, soft but insistent. His tail flicked once, a subtle shift betraying a flicker of unease. Yet he did not move closer. Instead, he waited. The knock did not repeat. Silence settled again, thicker this time, almost weighty. The cat's breath was slow and even, his eyes reflecting the faint light from the distant moon. For a long moment, he sat in that hush, as though waiting for the night to decide what it meant to do next. When the silence held, he rose, the movement, fluid and unhurried, and returned to the hallway. His steps this time were not entirely silent. The floor creaked faintly under his weight, the sound absorbed into the stillness around him. He passed the brittle flowers on the hallway table, now slightly more wilted, their edges curling inward like hands closing on a secret. He did not return immediately to the windowsill or the rug by the hearth. Instead, he wandered to the far corner of the house, a place rarely visited, where the air was cooler, tinged with the faint scent of forgotten things, old books, dust, the memory of a fire long since burned out. Here, the moonlight barely reached, only a thin thread of silver across the floor like a path untraveled. The cat sat, his body folding into itself, a compact shape of fur and breath and thought. He stared into the dimness, where the outlines of furniture softened into shadow, and listened, not for the knock this time, but for the silence that followed. In that silence, he felt the weight of absence, not a presence arriving, but something once there, now gone. A single drip of water, from a tap not quite closed, echoed faintly in the distance, a sound so minor it might have gone unnoticed. But the cat heard it, his ears flicking in response. It was a tether, a thread connecting him to the present, to the tangible world of sounds and shadows and fading light. He rose again, this time moving with a subtle urgency, his body threading through the dim space until he reached the kitchen. The teacup still stood on the table, untouched, its surface now completely cool, reflecting the faintest suggestion of moonlight. The scent of beeswax from the earlier candle lingered, faint but persistent, like a memory refusing to fade. The cat circled the table once, his tail trailing behind him like a quiet question. He paused near the chair he'd occupied earlier, gazing not at the table this time, but at the floor beneath it, where shadows pooled like water, his paw extended, not to bat or touch, but simply to rest on the edge of the shadow, as though seeking an answer from its depths. Outside, the wind shifted again, a soft circular motion that stirred the trees and sent a few snowflakes drifting sideways across the window pane. The knock did not return, but its echo seemed to linger, a faint imprint against the hush. The sigh. Cat moved once more to the window, though not to the familiar sill. Instead, he sat on the floor beneath it, gazing upward at the moon's waning light. His ears twitched at the far-off sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, the almost inaudible hum of night creatures stirring in the frost. For a while, he remained there, the moonlight casting a thin, uneven glow over his fur, tracing the subtle rise and fall of his breathing. His eyes, wide and reflective, caught the faint shimmer of frost on the glass, the delicate fracture lines of ice forming where the cold met the warmth of the house, and just as quietly as it had begun, the hollow knock was gone, leaving only the cat's steady presence, the faint drip of water and the soft hush of snow settling deeper into the night. The cat's body eased, his breath deepening once more, as though, in the absence of answers, he had found comfort in the questions themselves. The house, which had earlier felt vast and silent, now seemed to draw inward, folding its corners, closer as if to shelter the cat from the thin chill pressing against the window panes. He sat beneath the window for a long time, the soft rhythm of his breath mingling with the faint, uneven tapping of frost forming against the glass. Something beneath his stillness shifted, not in his body, but in the quiet space behind his eyes. It was not a thought exactly, not a memory with edges and clarity, but more a sensation, as though the silence itself carried weight, the kind of weight that gathers not suddenly, but over long years, like dust in corners, or the slow fade of a photograph left too long in the sun. A shift of air, barely perceptible, brought a faint scent through the crack beneath the door, something faintly metallic, a trace of rain on old wood, though there was no rain tonight. The cat's ears twitched. He rose slowly, a fluid movement that seemed almost reluctant, and turned toward the hallway. The walls here were darker, the light from the moon and the long extinguished candle reduced to a vague silver thread trailing along the floorboards. As he padded deeper into the house, his steps carried a different quality now, not the aimless drift of earlier, but something closer to purpose, though still shrouded in the quiet of the night. He passed the brittle flowers, their petals curled inward like fragile hands, and paused by the closed door at the end of the hall. His nose brushed lightly against the crack, drawing in the scent of dust and something else, something fainter, as though the air beyond remembered a voice that had long since faded. The cat sat back on his haunches, his eyes half-lidded as though listening inwardly rather than outward. His whiskers trembled faintly. Behind that door once, there had been another presence, one that spoke softly, whose hands moved with care, whose absence now pressed against the silence like a shadow behind a curtain. He did not mewl, did not scratch at the wood, but remained still, his breathing shallow and even, as though waiting for a sound that would not come. After a time, he turned away, the quiet acknowledgement of the space behind the door folding back into him. He returned to the sitting room, where the lamp's light had long since faded into a gentle glow, no more than a sigh against the dark. The teacup remained untouched, the thin skin of cooled tea now barely visible in the dimness. The cat did not climb onto the windowsill. Instead, he settled on the rug by the cold hearth, his body curling into a tight circle, tail tucked close. His ears flicked at the faint sounds of the house settling, the creak of wood under weight, the shift of shadows as the moonlight waned. Each sound seemed to mark the passing of time, not as a steady march, but as an uneven pulse, echoing softly through the bones of the house. In the deep quiet, the cat's mind stirred with images not fully formed, the curve of a hand, the faint rustle of fabric, the low hum of a voice speaking words he could not recall. These fragments wove themselves into the hush of the room, not memories sharp enough to draw pain, but soft enough to leave a lingering ache. The wind outside had stilled completely now, leaving the snow to fall straight down, a delicate curtain of white threading its way between branches. The moon's light thinned as it drifted higher, its glow no longer pooling on the floor, but scattered in faint patches against the ceiling and walls. The cat shifted slightly, his body settling deeper into the rug's weave, his breath slowing to match the softened rhythm of the night. His whiskers lay still, his ears relaxing, as though the weight of remembering had settled into the fabric of his being. It was not a heavy burden, but a quiet, persistent ache, a knowing that some absences remain, not as sharp edges, but as soft spaces where something once was. And so, in the hush of the deep night, the cat closed his eyes, his body wrapped in the silent embrace of the house, the moon, and the quiet scent of chamomile lingering from the forgotten cup. His sleep was neither peaceful nor troubled, but simply a continuation of the stillness, where even memory found its place within the quiet. Sometime in the depths of the night, the faintest breath of dawn stirred the edges of the sky. It was not light, not yet, but a subtle loosening of darkness, like the slackening of tightly drawn fabric. The cat, still curled on the rug by the cold hearth, shifted faintly, his ears flicking as though catching the soft tremor of change beyond the walls. The moon, which had been his silent companion, now paled against the first sigh of approaching dawn. Its light, once clear and silvery, thinned into a wan shimmer across the ceiling, fading at the edges where shadow gathered. The house, too, responded, not with sound, but with a subtle relaxation, as though the night's long hold had begun to ease. The cat stirred, rising from his coil with a slow, stretching motion that rippled through his spine. He stood there for a moment, legs long and lean in the faint glow, his tail arching in a loose curve. The air carried a different weight now, not heavy with night, but tinged with the crispness of a sky preparing to shift. He moved toward the window, his paws pressing softly against the worn floorboards, each step measured and unhurried. The snow outside had softened, its earlier sharpness rounded by the hush of hours passing. On the glass, frost traced delicate patterns that caught the faintest hint of color, not gold or pink, not yet, but a gentle dilution of blue, as though the sky itself were exhaling after holding its breath. The cat placed one paw on the windowsill, then the other, pulling himself up with a grace so quiet it might have been imagined. He sat there, his body outlined against the faint glow beyond, his gaze fixed not on the moon, but on the distant line where sky met earth. There was no visible change, no crack of light or sudden color, only the suggestion that the world was about to remember itself. Behind him, the room held its silence, the cold hearth, the empty teacup, the softened outlines of furniture barely touched by the waning moon. The scent of beeswax and chamomile had thinned into the background, leaving only the crispness of the cool air and the faint, earthy trace of snow. A single sound disturbed the hush, the faintest flutter of wings against the glass. The cat's ears twitched, his head tilting slightly toward the sound. It was a small bird, no larger than his paw, its feathers ruffled against the cold. It perched briefly on the outer sill, its breath a puff of fog against the frosted pane. The cat watched, unmoving, his whiskers trembling faintly as though mirroring the bird's shiver. The bird stayed only a moment before taking flight again, its wings cutting a fragile arc against the paling sky. The cat's eyes followed its path, though he did not rise or move. Instead, he remained there, a silent witness to the bird's brief visitation, his breathing soft and even. In that moment, something shifted, not in the world outside, but in the space within the cat. It was not a sudden change, not a brightening or a relief, but a loosening, as though the weight he carried had eased, just enough to draw in a slightly deeper breath. The bird's fragile presence, the hush of snow, the moon's fading light, all these small moments knitted together into something quiet and persistent, a reminder that even in stillness, there is movement. The cat remained at the window as the sky's pale breath deepened, washing the frost with a soft, muted glow. His tail curled lightly around his paws, his body folding into a quiet stillness, but his gaze remained outward, watching the horizon as though waiting for a secret to unfold. Behind him, the house held its silence, but it felt different now, less weighty, more like a pause before a breath. The cup of tea, long cooled, sat on the table, its presence no longer a marker of absence, but simply a part of the quiet tapestry of the room. The brittle flowers in the hallway held their place, petals curled inward, waiting for nothing in particular. Outside, the sky continued its slow transformation. The first subtle wash of gold and rose bloomed faintly at the horizon's edge, a quiet promise of morning. The cat's ears flicked at the shift, his body still as stone, yet alive with the pulse of awareness. The dawn was not yet here, but its breath was felt, the slow, inevitable turning of the world toward light. And as the first true hint of color touched the frost on the window, the cat's breathing deepened, his body relaxing into the hush. He did not move from his perch, did not stretch or shift, but simply existed in that liminal space, between night and day, between absence and presence, between waiting and acceptance. The sky's first breath did not speak loudly, nor did it shatter the quiet. It whispered, and the cat listened. And as the first true hint of color touched the frost on the window, the cat's breathing deepened, his body relaxing into the hush. He did not move from his perch, did not stretch or shift, but simply existed in that liminal space, between night and day, between absence and presence, between waiting and acceptance. The sky's first breath did not speak loudly, nor did it shatter the quiet. It whispered, and the cat listened.